So in 21, he says, unattached to external contexts, one finds the happiness that is in the self. Uniting oneself to Brahman by yoga, one attains eternal bliss. Okay, so let's start with this idea of eternal bliss. So as we've discussed any number of times, that's the goal of all of human endeavors. Everything that we're doing is for eternal bliss. Right now, that sort of phrase has sort of a poetic connotation to it. But even when you look at it more practically, more pragmatically, everything we're doing is just to gain satisfaction, to gain happiness. And we are continually pursuing perceptions, emotions, thoughts, acquisitions, and enjoyments in order to become happy. And so that idea that we are constantly searching for happiness, this is what he means by eternal bliss. That's the thing that we want. Happiness now and continuing into the future. No one says, well, I want to be happy now, but if it goes away in 3 or 4 days, then that's fine also. No one wants that. Everyone wants to be happy and stay happy. So this is the thing that we're looking for. So what he says is that yoga is the means to attain that. So what destroys our happiness is mental agitation. In the same way that, how do you know that a lake is calm? Or how do you define a calm lake?
No ripples.
No ripples. That's what you say when you say the lake is calm. There are no ripples on it. You could say that, when you look at it on the horizon, it's a flat line. Yeah, you could put it in those terms, but you wouldn't. You'd say there's no ripples on it. In the same way, what is a calm mind? It's a mind that doesn't have any ripples on it, no agitations in it. So the agitations are the thing that destroy the calmness of the mind. So the question then is, where do these agitations come from? Agitations arise when our desires and attachments remain unfulfilled. And so this is what he talks about. We were covering this recently. Self-imposed bondage. So the bondage that we experience to the world is self-imposed. It's a result of our own thinking. So we allow the mind to indiscriminately run to experiences or objects that develops desires and attachment. They remain unfulfilled. We get frustrated. We get agitated. So it's all of the suffering that we experience in that sense is self-inflicted. So we keep on coming back to this idea that there's nothing in the world that can disturb you per se. The disturbance only arises when there is an attachment that is being impinged upon, or where there's an expectation that is not being met. So he says, unattached to external contacts. So one of the things he talks about here is this idea that sense objects have a diminishing value. So we use this example any number of times, the idea, and it comes from being at the academy in India, mango season. We're just talking about this time of year. It's the hot time of year, so the mangoes are bursting out. So for 9 months of the year, no mangoes. First mango of the season is reveling. It's amazing. If you have one directly after, within 5 minutes of finishing that mango, that same quality takes a massive drop. That same quality of happiness. It's not even close. It still tastes good, but the joy content you get out of it, it's hugely diminished. And so there's this decay curve of joy content versus contact. And so he says they have a diminishing value. Have a third one, have a fourth one, have a fifth one. And you get to that point where you're not getting any joy out of the object at all. Right? And so this is sort of what we were discussing last night. This idea that the sense objects themselves are empty of joy. There's no joy in the object per se. And that's why we get to this point of zero satisfaction when we contact it, because it's not actually in there. It never was. We've just become accustomed to its properties now, and so we no longer get any joy out of it. So the joy arises when we satisfy the desires, the reduction of the mental agitations that arise from the unfulfilled desire. That's the satisfaction that we experience. It's not the object per se. So he says, unattached to external contacts. So then why is the wise person that he's talking about here, why is he unattached to external contacts? No, why is he unattached?
Attached to the self.
Attached to the self, yeah. But in terms of what we were just saying,
He knows that there's nothing in yourself.
he knows there's nothing. And so this is the thing, it's nothing other than knowledge. You know, that's all it is. It doesn't have any value. Why would I pursue it? So this is what we're saying, you can't drop anything. Whatever level we're at, you know, we often use the analogy of children versus young adults versus adults. Whatever level we're at, there's something that we have a value for. We believe that that object is valuable per se, that it contains joy in it. The wise person, or as we grow in our maturity, we recognize that doesn't have any capacity to make me any happier. So that's why we're unattached. So we sort of get into this in the next few verses. Abstinence per se is meaningless. Not engaging in an activity, it's got zero to do with disconnecting from the value. Now, it can act as a powerful support. If you have the value, if you recognize, you know, I've got this clinging attachment or a dependency upon something in the world, you know, I've got to get out of it because ultimately the contact is empty and it's leading me to, you know, mental agitation, so on and so forth. So if you have that conviction that you want to gain some control over a particular sense object, then abstinence can be a powerful support. But in and of itself, abstinence in the absence of higher values equals suppression. Okay, so at the end of the very, very final verse of chapter 3, he says, thus knowing that which is greater than the intellect and restraining the self by the self, kill the enemy in the form of desire. So he gives two practices. Knowing that which is greater than the intellect, which means, you know, gaining knowledge of the higher. Right? That's one of the practices, gaining knowledge of the higher. And the other practice is restraining the self by the self, which is self-control. So he says self-control and gaining knowledge. These are the two practices that are essential for elevating yourself to that next level. So let's look at the wrong way to approach it. You read something, you hear something, and you're inspired to, you know, give up or at least grow out of an existing attachment. So you have this emotional inspiration. Let's do it. And like all emotional inspirations, they go. They rise up quickly, they stay for a short period of time, and then decay quite quickly as well. And so you're inspired to, you know, New Year's Eve, you have a New Year's resolution. All right, no more junk food. And it does last for 4 or 5 days. But then if you can, because the emotional inspiration sort of decays away, if you continue to deny yourself junk food in the absence of any sort of emotional or psychological support, then what's happening is the desire for junk food is being suppressed. All right? So what you're doing is abstaining, but the effect is the opposite of what you want. You're actually increasing the desire. So every time you abstain, when you're doing it properly, what's happened is you have, okay, there's that impulse, there's that emotional feeling, let's get over it. Let's really get control of it this time. You've got to establish an intellectual conviction. Right? It can't just be an emotional support. It has to be an intellectual conviction. You have to understand clearly what the problem is, then all the negative things that come from it, and be able to clearly visualize what the positive state is, what it will look like when I am in control of this. You know, I've got it on a leash instead of the other way around. Now, we use that example of going to the gym. On the first day when you walk into the gym, when you walk out, you've got a clear picture of what you want to be in 6 months' time. lost this much weight, gained this much muscle, gained this much strength and flexibility, and so on and so forth. You've got a really clear picture of who you will be in 6 months if you practice continuously. Same thing. So the conviction is establishing an ideal of where you want to be, and also understanding the negative things that you're giving up. So it works in both directions, because giving up the negative takes you in that direction, and taking up the positive takes you in that direction. It's negation and assertion. So once you've established that conviction, then you say, all right, I'm going to control to some degree, and you decide whatever degree it is, with anywhere from cold turkey through to a reduction. Every time the mind asks for that object, right, what you've got to do then is first of all decide either yes or no. And if you say no, what takes you to the next level is the consistent application of the ideal. Why am I saying no? So the wrong way to approach it is that the impulse comes up, the urge arises in the personality, and because you've got into it's almost like a mental habit of just saying no, you just say no. Or you've got some half-baked idea as to why you should say no. There's like an external agency. It's like a societal pressure, or perhaps part of your religious community says this is bad, or a parental influence says it's bad, and so you sort of take that on, but it's not really yours. It's sort of like you're just following the herd, as it were. And you've got your own natural inclinations and urges that want to come up, and you've got this external thing which is a half-baked, half-digested understanding which is not really yours. It's a suppression. So the conviction that, yes, that's where I want to go, away from here and to there, has to be your own. It has to be a highly subjective goal. Every time that you say no thank you to the desire, you're saying yes to the ideal. And it's that repetition of thought towards the ideal that functions. All right, that's one part. That's the self-control aspect. Now the second aspect is gaining knowledge. So that's why it's really important to have a regular study practice, because the mind will be pressurized because it wants the object, right? When you pour that attention into study, reflection, what happens is that, and you probably will experience this at various times, my God, you're listening to a lecture, or you're reading a part of the text, and it's like, that's exactly what was so relevant. And you think that there's something magical about the text. No. You think there's something magical about the lecture. No. Same old boring old stuff that keeps on getting said every week. But to you, there was something magical about it because there was a particular thing that you were looking for, and you found it. That's why the knowledge is so powerful, because it is these universal values that will be applicable. If you don't have any particular aspect or problem, or no, I mean, don't use the word problem, but if you don't have any particular work that you're doing in the direction of self-development, then it's just bland information because you've heard it over and over and over again. But when you're fired with an ideal, then you start to mine the knowledge, and you get something out of it that's a lot more powerful than just information. And so the self-control, if you want to put it this way, the frustration that you experience, you pour it into the reflection and you drag something out of it because you're looking for it. It's dangerous to be too comfortable. Mm-hmm. It's good to have a little bit of an edge, to be a little bit dissatisfied. It's good to have a little bit of discomfort, because it does sharpen the mind in a sense, or sharpen the awareness. Mm-hmm. Why am I doing this? It keeps you on. If you imagine someone who's perfectly satisfied and all needs and wants are taken care of, there's sort of a softness about it, sit back and relax. Right? Now, you shouldn't be fanatic and you shouldn't be tense, but there should be a sense of determination. And having that sense of self-control, of denying yourself something that you otherwise want, can help to provide that edge. It can help to provide that that driving force into something else. And so that's why often if you start the study practice, and for most people that I know, when they start the study practice, it's highly inspiring. It's, my God, this knowledge is incredible. After 1 year, like I say, it's same old principles: body, mind, intellect, 3 yogas, meditation, wait till the end, then self-realization. Pretty much that's it, over and over again, same stuff. What keeps it fresh is the fact that you're continuing to mine it. Now, why are you continuing to mine it? Because you're trying to there's always something that you're trying to get over, always some higher level that you're trying to reach. As he talks about here, unattached to external contacts. What's the end game? 0 attachments. So find something you're attached to. Mine the knowledge to help to destroy that attachment. So as you grow in knowledge, it gives you the capacity to control more. So control a little bit more. As you control a little bit more, you start to mine the knowledge and you gain it. All right. As you gain the knowledge, you get the capacity for more control. So he talks about these 2 pedals to a wheel. Now, again, this idea of self-control as a deliberate sort of frustration, we use this beautiful phrase, it's a comfortable stretch. All right. So again, go back to the example at the physical level. When you're lifting weights, when you're in a yoga pose, when you're running on a treadmill, you never function, you never operate in that activity at a level of comfort. You always take yourself to a level of discomfort. You keep going on the treadmill when the body says stop. When the body says get out of the stretch in the yoga pose, you say no, a few more breaths. When the body says no more repetitions, I'm tired, no, 1 more repetition. Now you're not damaging yourself, but you are taking yourself beyond your current capacity so that you can improve. So it's intelligently done. You know what your capacity is. It's not that and this does sometimes happen. I know someone who was training for a half marathon or something, trained and ended up he couldn't run the half marathon because he crippled himself in his hip. He was doing an uncomfortable stretch, didn't have awareness enough to know when to pull back and say, okay, 2 rest days, or no, don't run so fast, don't run so far, whatever. Or, people bust their herniated discs because they're lifting too much beyond their capacity. It's also possible to add in control beyond your capacity, and then it becomes, like I said, it becomes a suppression, it becomes beyond what we should be doing. So it's important that we do it intelligently and understand the purpose of it. And so this is it, basically, that whenever we practice self-control, it's done with a specific purpose and a target in mind. That's the conviction.